All right, can you guys see the screen? Daniel, if you can see it, let me know.
It's good on my end.
Perfect. Well, welcome everyone. This is our monthly MENA Entrepreneur Webinar Series. We hold this every month, the first Wednesday of every month. Let me just shut this real quick. Let's play this real quick video for you guys, just so you get an understanding of what 500 is and what we do, what it's like. Also, this gives us a couple of minutes for people to join in as well.
While it might have seemed like a far-fetched idea 8 years ago, nowadays I think most everyone here agrees that it isn't just about Silicon Valley anymore. Innovation and talent really do exist everywhere, in all corners of the world. Whether it's here in Silicon Valley or San Francisco, Mexico, Egypt, India, Vietnam, Turkey, or Korea, entrepreneurs are changing these ecosystems, changing technology, and they're ultimately fueling a lot of the economic growth in their respective markets.
The world is taking notice. A leading global venture capital firm called 500 Startups just launched a $10 million fund here in Ho Chi Minh City.
As 500 Startups, we are a global fund. Since our mandate from the beginning has been to empower entrepreneurs from all over the world, the most unlikely places and the most unlikely founders that don't look like the typical prototype Silicon Valley founder.
A lot more than $1 billion now, annualized run rate.
Wow.
Some mistakes that I've learned throughout my years in tech, and I don't want to repeat that again.
We started VC Unlock because training investors is a very, very important part of ecosystem development.
Tech is a force that can unite nations. Trade has always stopped us from killing each other, and accelerated trade can help us love each other even more. That's what I believe, and I think that a lot of cross-border kind of investments and culture can really help bring that true.
Perfect. All right, I hope that helps in terms of just giving you a glimpse into what 500 is all about. So 500 partner up with Sanabil. Sanabil is the investment arm of the Saudi Public Investment Fund, and they created this program here out of Saudi Arabia. This is the team we have. We have Betty Young, she's the managing partner. Obviously, she's resident in SF. However, she helps here in the MENA region as well. Amal Dukhan is our partner in the MENA. Bayan is the program manager. I'm Dave, I'm the program coordinator. Kareem is in charge of the portfolio, obviously. And Sama is our amazing regional head of events. She's the one you're gonna hear from her a lot. These are some numbers just for you guys just to understand. We are one of the most active VCs globally. We've invested over 2,400 companies in over 80 countries as well. 23 unicorns counting, and I think we're more than 23 at this point. So we've been in Saudi and in the MENA region as a whole for over 9 years now. Invested over 30 million USD in 14 countries, 53 companies and counting. We have batch 2 starting in a couple of weeks as well. This is the program here in the region. So just to give you an idea of what the application looks like for the program, for batch 1, we had over 520 applicants. They went through 3 interviews, and obviously less than 2% got accepted. So it's not impossible to get accepted. It is possible. So don't let this discourage you. But we do take it. It's a rigorous process, obviously. So we don't focus on one sector or country, as you can see from this slide. We're pretty sector agnostic as well. So during the program, we really focus on building a strong foundation at the beginning. Then we move on to accelerating your growth. We don't just care about giving you the capital and that's it. As we build education and you can become part of the community of 500. These are some of the things that come with the program as well, and you becoming part of 500. So during the program, the first few weeks, we focus on the, as I was talking earlier, on the fundamentals of growth. Then we move on to the growth weeks. This is where experimentation and iteration happens. And we finish that off with the finance and fundraising pitch prep weeks. After that, you become part of the 500 portfolio companies. And what comes with that are these things. So you have unlimited access to mentors, to founders, you can reach out to anyone anywhere in the world, as well as learning materials and perks that come with the 500. So the program is 12 weeks long. It will start on September 26th all the way up until December 18. This is going to start in a couple of weeks. So this will be batch 2. We are at the final stage of selection. So applications are closed, yes. However, I'll share this link with you as well in the chat. You can still sign up to be notified whenever we open applications for batch 3. So I really encourage you to apply to get notified. If you have any more questions you can email me. I'll be more than happy to reply back to you. And without any further ado, I'll pass it over to Danny.
Oh, muted. Thank you. Appreciate the intro and the notes. So I'm gonna jump right in. We are gonna be crunched for time. I gotta ditch at the top of the hour, so I'm gonna hit this pretty hard. Let me know if you can see my screen here. Give me one sec. Ooh. Hold on. Cool. Can everybody see this?
Yes, sir.
Still see it?
Perfect.
All right. So I'm going to jump in. Like I said, we're going to be crunched for time. There's a lot of stuff in here. If after you want to reach out, you can hit me on the 500 Slack. You can shoot me an email. A bunch of ways to contact me in the back in the appendix. But this is going to be a session on list building and qualification for founders. It's how to scale your list building efforts and focus on deals that will actually close. So we'll start with an intro. I'll walk you through the sales funnel, then we'll talk on what an ideal customer profile and buyer persona are, prospect sources and how to actually build those lists out, then performing outreach, qualification, some qualification frameworks, how to qualify prospects, and the appendix. I will pause after every subsection and take some questions. So introduction, here's me. Today, I'm the co-founder of Ramped. Ramped is a platform for early career talent to be matched with the ideal job. We train up folks for free and we allow them access to many career pathways. So essentially no more guess and check with your career. You get to learn a little bit about a career pathway like sales or marketing or customer service, and then we'll train you 100% for free and then match you with an employer. In a previous life, I was a VP of sales many times over at Storefront, Thanks, Square, Order Ahead, and Groupon. I also started my own consulting business about 6 years ago where I help early stage startups build out their sales teams. So that's a little bit about me. So the sales funnel overview, let's jump into this. So this is what the sales funnel looks like broadly from top down. So at the top, you have your research, you move into lead generation, list building, then outreach and qualification, demo, proposal, and winning the deals. Today, we're going to focus on these 3 sections of the sales funnel. They're critically important to set yourself up for success later on. Moving forward a little bit into the ideal customer profile and buyer persona. So what is an ideal customer profile and what is a buyer persona? Well, the ideal customer profile is a description of the company that's a perfect fit for your product offering. So that's things like the industry, the number of employees, revenue, geography, maturity of the company. So if you think I am a product that's selling into finance departments at companies that are 20 to 500 people located in the US, that's probably as good as you need it for your stage as a startup. The bigger and bigger your org grows, the more robust this ideal customer profile will get. So if you're someone like Procter & Gamble, you know very specifically over years and years of testing who your exact customer is. To crystallize this as well, a buyer persona is the person or people that you engage with directly during the sales process. So that could be your buyer, your decision maker, your influencer, an executive sponsor. So you're looking for the list of attributes from this person or people or group of people in order for you to make a tactical and strategic decision on your sales process. So where do you focus, right? So that could be their department, their title, the tenure at the company, their job responsibilities, geography, potential pain points. The output that you're looking for with both of these is an actual slide. It's something that comes to life within your sales process that shows quite specifically who the folks you're supposed to be focusing on so that you can run outbound and inbound campaigns against it. So how do you actually find these folks? Well, that's where research comes in. You're going to build out that ideal customer profile and that buyer persona, and then you're going to think through those attributes. What information do I need to have included in there so that you can inform your list building efforts? You'll take these two things, your ideal customer profile and your buyer persona, and you will inform a list building strategy, which I'll explain in the next section. So I'll paint an example here. So there's a company out there in the US called Cameo. Cameo is a marketplace where celebrities can send personalized messages or shout outs to anybody. So Cameo has a pretty aggressive and robust sales team. They specifically target celebrities on one side of their marketplace, and they obviously target consumers on the other side. So the open question that I have, and just either put it in the chat or I'll answer it after a few minutes or a few seconds is, what information would I need to gather in order to launch a campaign targeting celebrities? If my sales target was celebrities, what information would I need to collect in order to build an outbound campaign? So if anybody has ideas, just throw them in the chat. I'll wait for a couple seconds. What attributes would be helpful if I'm targeting celebrities? Think about it for a second. All right, so a couple comments here. So yep, the type of celebrity is important. Yep, so musician, actor, that's great. That's good. So that's 1, 2. You would likely need to get their contact info somehow. So how do you reach out to celebrities? Well, you're not going to find them on email. You're not going to find their cell phones, right? So you would go through social channels like Twitter, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. That's like their handle. That's where they need to know. Also, their managers are a good place to start. Their agents are a good place to start. They have contact information readily available. So you'd like to launch a campaign probably through their manager, probably through their agent. So these are good pieces of information to collect when you're building out your list. This is obviously different from a B2B process. If you're targeting like an HR department or something, obviously those folks are on LinkedIn. They're probably available by cell, can find their email. Celebrities are not. So you have to cater your list building efforts to the specific buyer persona and ideal customer profile. So we've completed this section. I know we're moving really quickly, but the check-in here is you now have robust enough description of ideal customer profile and buyer persona and an idea of where your prospects live, e.g. where you need and what type of contact information you need to reach out to those prospects directly. This effort, this ideal customer profile and buyer persona informs your list building efforts. So I'll take 2 seconds and pause before we jump into prospect sources and building out your lists. All right, next up. Prospect sources and building out your lists. We got one question here. Do you suggest any solid data scraping tools where you can plug in your ideal customer profile? It's a great question. We're going to get to it right now in building out your lists. So in this section, we will take our ideal customer profile and our buyer persona, and we will build those lists out. So here are some methods that I'm going to cover: List Buying Plus, custom data, scrapers, conferences in a post-COVID world, and then the virtual assistant playbook. So these 5 have been time tested and approved by me and many, many other folks as reliable ways to build out your list. So let's talk through List Buying Plus. So you have your ideal customer profile, you have your buyer persona, you actually just pick a random list buying company. So that could be D&B, Hoovers, Zen Prospect, Leads 411. And what you do with that is you feed your ideal customer profile into this list buying company. And then you run those leads through Never Bounce or something similar. That's to test for bounces. A lot of these big old databases with leads will just have tons and tons of leads in them, but they won't be screened very well and they won't be accurate. So you're going to run those leads through something like Never Bounce, screen out for bounces, and then you're going to contact any one of these services that you use, and you're going to go back to them and say, hey, look, 50% of my list bounced, replace these bounces for free. And generally they will do that. So this is one very, very quick, very easy, and somewhat cheap way to build your lists. The cons here are they could be very inaccurate. Again, these big database sources sometimes just have stashes and stashes of leads that they've been building over time. They're not updated. They don't have the right contact information, titles are off, etc. And I've seen it go completely wrong with folks who don't actually screen out for bounces fast enough, and they just send like an email campaign, or they send something out in a different type of campaign, and it just kills their domain. So be careful there. That's the downside of List Buying Plus, but it's a useful tool if it works for you. Next up, we have custom data. So this is where you actually take your ideal customer profile and your buyer persona, and you give it to another company, and they build the list for you based off of what you've put in front of them. So the one I prefer the most here is Lead Genius. You actually just feed them your exact ideal customer profile. They will come back with a heavily targeted and very, very accurate list of leads. Some others that work well here: Science, Growbots, Discover Aura, Zoom Info to an extent. The pros of this, is it's very easy, right? It's very easy to implement, and they're very accurate. So you're essentially doing no work. You're giving it to somebody else. They're spitting out a big list for you. The cons, it can be very slow moving. So this could take weeks instead of days, and it could be expensive. So I've seen it run up to about $3,000 US per month for simply access, and that's before you even generate a lead. But if you want to do something quick and easy, this is your route. Sorry, not quick, but easy. This is your route. Next up, we have, one second. One quick sec here. Slide is jammed. There we go. All right, scrapers. So this is a very effective way to build lists very cheaply. And I think there was a question regarding this directly. So a scraper is something like Prospect.io or Lead IQ. And this is where you simply install a widget, a Chrome widget on your web page, and you just crawl through LinkedIn based on searches that you've come across. So you would then set your ideal customer profile and buyer persona within LinkedIn. Totally cool here. And then it would automatically start mining those lists and download them into a CSV. You take that CSV and obviously uploaded it into your CRM or something. So the pros here, this is very fast. This is like the custom data initiative from the previous slide. However, it's very fast and very cheap. The cons, it can be inaccurate. Sometimes LinkedIn pulls in personal emails. Sometimes the source that you're using to rely on these custom or these scrapers isn't as accurate as it should be. So watch out for bounces here. You may need to run all of this through Never Bounce, which was mentioned in the first method as well. Next up, we have conferences. So conferences can be critically important for your list building efforts. I have seen teams rely on conferences as their entire lead generation and list building strategy. Sometimes they work really well. The key for in-person conferences to build out a playbook. So you shift your mindset from I'm going to a conference, this is exciting, to who am I going to meet specifically at this conference, and what can I do to make sure that I'm in front of that person or people or companies. Pre-event, you're going to have to do a lot of prep. You want to get the contact list. You want to get the list of clients that are going to be there. You want to see all the speakers, so you're going to be able to be informed about where you want to go at the conference. You want to have your pitch down, what you're going to pitch about your company, who you are, etc. You're going to want to automate all of your follow-ups. So how do I collect all of these contact information, all the cards, all the contact information that I get? How do I automate that? How do I automate the follow-up to them? How do I send it right into an email sequence? Can I organize a meetup? Can I optimize my website specifically for the conference? Like, hey, I'm going to X and Y and Z conference. If you're there, reach out to me. At the conference, you will want to automate collection. So make it really easy on yourself. Have a simple CSV where you can enter in everybody's contact information. There's a few tools out there if you just run a simple Google search of collect contact information at conferences. I don't love any of them, but some people use them. So I'm not going to recommend them here, but a simple CSV should be easy enough. Do you have a booth? Who are you going to meet? And then post-conference, make sure you're ranking all the connections you met and have aggressive follow-up within about 2 weeks of the conference. Anything more than that, if they're gone or don't respond to you after 2 weeks of the conference, are pretty much as cold as a cold lead. The pros here, it's a really targeted audience if you nail your conference strategy. So an example of this is I used to work at a marketing automation company that focused on multi-location restaurants. 1 year or every year there was an international pizza expo in Las Vegas, and that was a highly targeted list that we went after. Every single pizza company, big and small, went to that expo. We would go to that expo every single year, and we would always be able to win over some deals. You can build a mega pipeline here. That's the other pro. The cons, it can be time consuming. So conferences take a lot. As you can see, there's about 4 weeks of prep, and there's about 2 weeks after the conference. So it's really almost like a month and a half endeavor. And folks get addicted to conference and go conference hopping. So just make sure that you set your goal ahead of the conference. Usually it's a very simple ROI, right? The amount you're expected to spend at the conference should be offset by the deals that you close at the conference. And lastly, virtual assistant playbook. So this is a super impactful way. It's a sales product that you can actually turn yourself, your organization, into a custom data scraper. So you essentially build a playbook using the ideal customer profile or list building or buyer persona and the strategies that I've outlined in the past couple slides. So you shift so you define your target accounts, the profiles, and the titles as a management team. You've already done this with your ICP and buyer persona. You do your own research on LinkedIn. How long does it take me to get a list of 10 or 20 or 30 contacts? Then you send that exact set of instructions to somebody on Upwork, and you compare your data versus theirs to see who did the best job at building those lists out. You end up hiring the best worker or workers, and you hire that person full-time. Generally speaking, the person you hire, the virtual assistant you hire, will end up being paid about $3 to $7 per hour. The pros, it can be really accurate and really cheap. So I've been able to scale this up, this initiative, I call it a sales product, to about 25 cents per lead. And it's really scalable. So once you build it out, it looks like essentially this big if-then playbook. You know, if I am going after VPs of HR, then I Google search top 100 companies or top 100 biggest companies with HR departments. And then you go over and over again. So it can be really accurate and scalable. So you can point it at any ideal customer profile. The cons, it can be really time consuming. So this definitely needs management. Generally, somebody will have to run this for you at your organization. So just make sure you're prepared for it. I'd like to build this over time. So if you can build this into your DNA over time, I think it's a big win for your organization. And I actually stuck a bonus one in here. So lead enrichment has become a critically important factor, especially if you know your ideal customer profile well enough that you know if you get one piece of information about that profile, you increase your likelihood to close by X. So that's something like, if I recognize that I'm going after CMOs, chief marketing officers, and if they've switched positions within the first 3 months of me hitting them, I have a 25% chance, 25% greater chance to close that deal. I'm going to want to pull that information into my ideal customer profile and my buyer persona. So Clearbit, Lusha, and LeadSpace are all three really good at enriching your leads. Again, the pros here, this is very accurate. It makes your lead much more robust, it gives you more data, more insights, should help you sell. The cons, it's not necessary to get to scale, can also be expensive. But here are some lead enrichment tools. So checking in, number 2, you now know how to take that ideal customer profile, that buyer persona that you built, and build a list from it. And 2, you know how to scale your outbound list building efforts. So I'll pause here and take a few more questions. All right, so often does not include mobile numbers. Any scrapers that pull in mobile numbers? So I think the answer for mobile numbers is generally, it's probably not one that you're going to love, but you got to be a little hacky, right? So you're not necessarily going to get that from any scraper. I haven't yet to find a database that pulls in a mobile number. I generally acquire mobile numbers over time in a few ways. So if I'm running an outbound campaign, I include my Calendly link and have it a mandatory field that allows you to grab mobile numbers. So I just say you must put your mobile number in here as a backup. Sometimes I'll run a cold outbound campaign and have folks that are calling and simply just ask for mobile numbers. That tends to work as well. I'm seeing somebody says Contact Out works well. Contact Out is a great scraper tool. I'm hit or miss with cell phones on Contact Out. Lusha is pretty good. I would say you're probably about right with the 30% success rate for mobile numbers. I don't think there's one magic bullet for mobile numbers. So I think it's using the combination of all things to be a little hacky, and making sure that you're logging all of the mobile numbers in a CRM over time will get you to the best and richest amount of mobile numbers. I'd say that's a nice to have versus something that you need to have, which are LinkedIn profile and email, typically for B2B outreach. I'll pause. Any more questions on list building strategies? All right. Next up, performing outreach. So what have we done here? And by the way, performing outreach, I should caveat this section with, there are so many strategies here. I could go on for hours or days on how to perform the correct outreach. I'm going to give you the highest level here. We're not going to go into so many tactics. We're going to go barely scratching the surface. I just want to inform everybody that once you have your lists and they're built out and they're based on your ideal customer profile and buyer persona, the next step is to start doing outreach. So let's talk about the mindset that you need to perform outreach effectively. And this could cover any variety of outreach, right? We're just going to cover it broadly. Generally, there's calling, there's emailing, there's LinkedIn outreach, social outreach. So tons and tons of avenues here. But especially when you're a smaller startup, the outreach mindset here is to optimize for many shallow conversations at first. You do not necessarily want to go deep on a handful. Make sure you're casting a really wide net within your ideal customer profile and your buyer persona, and you're testing that out to make sure that you're having the conversations that yield positive results and can yield qualified leads, which we'll talk about in the next section. The mentality that you should adopt here is one of a doctor. So I'm here to diagnose the problem. A doctor wouldn't, if you went into the doctor and you said, I have a headache, that doctor would not immediately order an MRI to see if something's wrong with your brain. They would ask you a ton of questions. They would say, okay, does it hurt more or less in the morning? Where does it hurt specifically? Tell me about the pain. What's what rated on a scale of 1 to 10. They'd ask you a ton of different questions. That's exactly the mindset you should adopt as a salesperson. You're trying to figure out and diagnose where the pain is at their organization so you can recommend the solution. And if it's not yours, that's okay. If it is yours, that's when you want to go on the attack and start really working them through the qualification criteria, which we'll talk about in a sec. You don't need to play the persona of a salesperson. So a lot of folks see salespeople being displayed in movies or TV shows, or probably know somebody in their life that was a salesperson. They're this smooth talking, hard driving, Wolf of Wall Street type. You don't need to play that persona when you sell. Sales has changed quite significantly. Salespeople are analytical, they're thoughtful, they're empathetic. The best salespeople listen aggressively and actively listen and come up with solutions to other folks' problems. So that's the outreach mindset that you should adopt as you're about to embark on performing outreach. So set up some outreach goals. So what does this mean? So a low-level goal, something that you should set in the beginning, is just get the prospect to engage with you in some form, whether that's a text back, an email response, a response to a LinkedIn message, a phone call. You don't need to win the deal in the first reaction or interaction. You need to just get somebody to interact with you and start that conversation. A lot of folks set the bar way too far out and too high, where I should be closing every single deal. I should be closing every single interaction. It doesn't have to be that way. Set it low enough where you're just looking for that sign of life, right? I just want somebody to engage with me, say yes or say no. That's better than no answer. The anti-pattern here, I kind of just talked about it. It's not somebody saying no. It's somebody not responding. A no is okay. If you get a no, you can always ask why, and you can understand where you went wrong in your ideal customer profile or buyer persona, or it's just not the right time, right? Somebody who doesn't respond to you, you're not getting any information from that person. So let's talk about why folks don't respond, because that's the anti-pattern we really want to avoid. So there are tons of reasons why people don't respond. They could be out of office. They could just straight up not be interested in what you're offering. They could have deleted your messages. How many times do you open up an email and just press delete? They could have forgotten to reply, or they could have just marked you as spam. So for all of these reasons, you will get people that are not responding to your messages. So make sure that you're understanding this before you go into any outreach campaign, especially ones that are email or LinkedIn based. It's not necessarily that somebody is purposely ignoring you. They could have just been, again, out of office, deleted your message, forgot to reply. So it's up to you to create that campaign that will target them enough times so that they will get the opportunity, or you give them enough opportunity to respond to you. Before you jump into outreach, set up your outreach levers. There really aren't that many. So I'm sure you've heard this before, but sales is not rocket science. Sales is pretty straightforward. It's how many touch points, what the type of touch point, and the messaging. That's really it, right? So if you're launching an outbound campaign, are you hitting them 5 times within 3 weeks? And if you are you hitting them across LinkedIn, a cold call, an email, etc.? And then what's the specific message that you're relaying? What am I saying over email? What am I saying over the cold call? What am I writing in LinkedIn? All 3 of these, as I said in the beginning of this section, they're extremely large. We could jump in to so many details. We could talk for hours just about how to message on LinkedIn, but just make sure that when you're setting up a campaign, you're being really thoughtful about the amount of levers, or about the outreach levers that are in front of you. Really only have 3. So don't make it too complex for yourself. So the types of outreach, we're talking B2B sales here. So generally there's going to be a few, right? Calling, emailing, LinkedIn, but the general guidance here, back to the celebrity conversation, is to essentially use all of the types of outreach where your prospects actually live. So fish where the fish are, right? If you're celebrities, again, hit them through their manager, hit them on social. If you're a B2B company going after marketing folks, you know where they are, right? They're on LinkedIn today. They might be on Twitter. They're on email, and they probably have a cell phone. So make sure you are using those methods of communication to hit them where they actually live. Not, directly, don't stalk them at their house, but where they actually are in their day-to-day, what they're looking at. So performing outreach, we could spend, again, tons of time talking about this, but from a high level, you want to be persistent, not annoying. You'll know when you're being annoying. Your prospect will actually tell you. A lot of times they'll say like, screw off, or respond to an email over and over and over again saying you're being too aggressive. Actively listen when you engage them in conversation. Make sure that you're doing about 40% of the talking. They're doing about 60% of the talking. Be relevant. Why is somebody on the phone with you? Why is somebody engaged in conversation with you? You have to pique their interest. They're not just going to look at your product and say, oh, this is interesting. That rarely happens. It's up to the salesperson. It's up to the person selling to make sure that they're interested. Be a chameleon and adjust to the audience. So, if somebody's talking really, really fast, it's okay to increase your cadence. If somebody's talking really slow, it's okay to slow it down. Add value to every interaction, even in the face of objection. So what this means is you're going to get tons of pushback, from low level stuff like I'm not interested right now to very high level complex. I really understand your product and I don't like it. So make sure that you're adding value even when somebody's objecting to your product, and prepare for any interaction. So that just means you have the opportunity, especially when you're engaged in a conversation that you've set up, to do a little extra homework. Make sure that you know exactly what and why they're on the phone, what they're doing and why they're doing it. So make sure you're doing everything from your angle to prepare for the interaction that you're going to have. So let's check in. We're flying through this. You now know the high level overview of how to perform outreach and different outreach strategies, what they are, the levers that you have to play with, and whatnot. So I'll pause here and take more questions from the audience. Just put them into the chat. Right, so got one coming in. What is the best rec email drip strategy? Example, day 1, first email, day 3, follow up, day 7, follow up. Good question. So there's no one direct strategy. I would say your ideal customer profile and your buyer persona dictate what the best strategy is. So for example, if you're calling on restaurants with one location, SMB, kind of hand-to-hand combat, you're going to want to hit them over phone aggressively because they're probably not checking their email, right? They're front of house all day serving customers, or back of house at night. So you're probably going to want to hit them on phone. You're probably going to want to hit them aggressively during off-peak calling hours. So that's not during lunch, not during dinner, right? I find that when launching a B2B campaign over email and LinkedIn, I like to have a multi-channeled approach. And I use what's called the Agogi sequence. So that is, if you just run a simple Google search, I'll put it in the chat as well. That is many small varied touch points over a burst of days. So over about 20 days. And I find that about 1.5 interactions per week makes for a great campaign. So that's like 5-ish over 3 weeks. So Google search that and check it out. But again, you will have to test this aggressively to make sure that you're on the right page with your prospect. Sorry, I'm getting a question in the Q&A. Oh, nope. Looks like it's gone. Okay. Next up, a good suggestion for B2B multi-sided platform to consider for go-to-market strategy. Do you mind clarifying that? What do you mean by that? I think it was from Ahmad. So a good suggestion for B2B multi-sided platform. Building lists for each side. Why don't we take this offline? I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but I would refer to to the list building section if you want to build specific lists. Sorry, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. So I think you're asking for building lists. So the section previous to this was on list building. I would just refer to this as there were a few different ways to build lists out. I would refer to that as the way I would build lists. Cool. So next up, qualification. And I just want to remind folks of where we are in the sales funnel. It's a good point to check in. So we are here, right? We now have researched our ideal customer profile and our buyer persona. We have informed our list building efforts with that. And now we're moving on to the outreach qualification part. Qualification is really the most important part of the sales funnel. And the reason I say that is because it is the stopgap for you to understand if somebody is a real buyer and they're going to buy your product, or if you're going to waste your time pushing somebody who's not qualified through your funnel to the next step, which is the demo. So what is qualification? Well, when you think of qualification, you're actually really thinking of disqualification. How can I remove all sense of hope from my sales qualified pipeline, from the pipeline that I consider as a salesperson as really active deals? If performed correctly, this allows you to focus on folks that are actually going to buy on your reasonable timeline. So you're looking for two main things, and these are simplified for now. There's examples of qualification criteria throughout this section and at the end of the slide deck in the appendix as well. So you're looking for one, are you a buyer? That's very broad, right? Are you a decision maker? Do you have influence over the decision? Are you somebody that's going to have input at any level, executive sponsor, et cetera? And then are you a buyer right now? And when I say right now, I don't mean today you're going to buy on this call. I mean with your reasonable sales cycle. So a small sales cycle could look like something like Groupon, right? We used to be able to close merchants within 30 days. A large sales cycle, so you're talking $1 million deals, your reasonable or right now sales cycle could be anywhere from like 8 to 18 months, right? I wouldn't be surprised, either one. So if there's a no to either one of those, please, what you do is you take that lead and you just kick it to marketing. Now, the caveat there is if you are an early stage company, you may want to work these deals a little bit further, be a little bit looser with your qualification criteria to allow for more folks to get into active conversations with you. So let's break this down. We kind of talked about it, but buyer right now. So buyer has decision-making power. So somebody who's has an influence over any part of the decision. So it could be, the C-level person that just needs to sign off. It could be somebody who's actually in charge of running with this initiative. It could be somebody with budget control. That could be the same person. It's all up to your ideal customer profile, your buyer persona. Now, the buyer right now just means your typical and fair timeline. Again, we just gave you the point of reference, but Groupon was highly transactional, could take anywhere from 30 to 45 days. Big enterprise deals could take 12 months. So that's right now at your company. So next up, a typical qualification framework to use. So qualification frameworks come in many, many shapes and sizes. The most familiar, the most common is BANT. That's budget, authority, need, timeline. There's MEDIC, there's MEDPIC, there's MEDPIC. There's so many of these criteria. I would check them out and see which one jives best with your company. But if we're digging into one specifically, it's called ANUM. ANUM stands for authority. Are you the person who can sign off on this? 2, need. Is there business need plus pain plus interest? Urgency. How quickly can we move on this deal? And then money. Do we have budget? Do we have budget for this deal? So if you take this lead, right, this is how you use this qualification prospect. We'll move into how to qualify, right? You've decided on your qualification criteria. You've set that in stone. You're performing outreach over and over and over again. You're developing conversations, whether they're, messages or on the phone, etc., over demo or over a Zoom, and you are aggressively applying one of these frameworks to that person to figure out if they're in your sales pipeline or if they're out of your sales pipeline. You'll typically have a list of about 5 to 10 questions that say, this person is in or this person is out. So an example of that question for budget would be something like, hey, in the past, folks have spent anywhere from 10 to 20K yearly on our product offering. Is that in line with the expectations you have to spend on an initiative like this throughout the year, right? And if they say yes, great, you've then satisfied budget, you've satisfied money in the ANUM example, and you can check that box and then work towards the other ones, which are, in ANUM, authority, are you the right person to sign off on it? Need, is there a business pain? Is there an interest? Now, the questions should be written down, and you should use them to rigorously qualify all of the leads that come through. And just to make sure, you're doing this on every single person. You want to make sure that you're not letting folks who are unqualified through the pipeline. Again, the caveat being, sometimes when you're just starting out, if you're very, very small and you don't have enough conversations, you may want to open the floodgates and not be so rigid so that you can allow for testing of scripts. You're trying to get to one of two outcomes. One, they're not a fit, or they're definitely a fit for your product offering. The last thing I'll say here is, you'll come across many, many documents online about qualifying and qualification of prospects. And a lot of them will just be written like a sales robot, right? Like, what is the budget? What is the timeline you can act? Don't say this. You're talking to another person on the phone, or you're engaged in conversation with another person. We often forget when reading sales literature that it's really just human to human interaction. So make sure that you're engaging with folks directly as if they were human. Soften the questions, make sure that you take that in mind. Next step for how to qualify prospects, you're setting your mentality. Again, you're a doctor here. You're probing for pain, you're building excitement, you're educating your prospect, you're handling objections, and you're closing out the call. If they're qualified, the direct next step is, let's get you on a demo. Let's book the call. Let's walk through specifics of the product. So final checkpoints here. You now know Qualification 101, a few qualification frameworks, and how to apply qualification to the criteria, to the leads and lists that you've built, and the outbound efforts that you've had. So I know we rushed through a lot of this because we're kind of short on time. I have an appendix in the back that'll be very helpful for folks as well. I do want to take a couple more questions. It looks like there's a few that came through, and then please feel free to enter questions into the chat as well. The first is, would you advise to reach out to multiple people simultaneously in an organization, or target just one? Depends on the organization. At a big enterprise organization, you can create campaigns that reach out to multiple folks at once. I've done this to success many, many times. I think that's a valid strategy. If you're reaching out to like a SMB, right, or a single location restaurant, you may not want to do that. And the reason is, they probably all work in the same room, and they might get annoyed. There's probably just one decision maker, and that's the owner. Next up, want to know if you're going to talk about price objections today. Not in my presentation, but if you have a specific price objection that you want to work through, we can talk about it. Next up, what would you call the perfect point of contact? I'm not sure what that means. Do you mind rephrasing that question? What the perfect point of contact? All right, I think that is it. But fire off questions if you have them still.
If you guys have any questions for Danny, now is the time to ask him before he jumps off.
Cool. Well, if that is all, I want to thank you all for your time. This has been great, and I appreciate you all being so willing to ask questions and participating in question asking in the chat. And I'm around, so if you need anything, you can email me, Danny@rampedcareers.com. That's RAMPEDCAREERS. And just reach out anytime if you have one-off questions, or if there was something that I didn't quite understand. There's please reach out and we can chat there. Somebody's asking to fill my to add my contact information, so I'm just going to put that in the chat as well.
Thank you. I was going to copy it and put it in the chat.
Cool.
Amazing. You guys reach out to Danny anytime, honestly. He's amazing. So I'm sure you guys will get more questions as you think about this. I'll also send the recording to everybody here, just in case you want to look at it again. And if you're interested to sign up for the interest forum, just to be notified when we open applications for the coming batch, then this is the link in the chat. If none of you have any questions, then thank you all for joining. Thank you so much, Danny, for coming on today. Hugely appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you all so much. I appreciate the time, and please reach out.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a good night and good morning to you.
Yeah, thanks. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.